Hi there, everyone. Welcome back. This is Wine Music Festival 2024, and I'm your host, Nate. And I'm very, very happy to have Nikki, Yeoh here with us today. Um, I feel like we've tried to do this a few times and it hasn't quite worked, but we've done it today. So I'm very, very happy. Nikki, thank you so much for being here.
Absolute pleasure, Nate. Thank you for inviting me. I'm a big fan of your work. I think you're brilliant. And so it's great to be part of your festival. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, no, thank you. The reason why I do what I do is partly because of people like yourself who do so much. And I think it's partly my job to try and get you in front of, more people so they can be inspired by what you do.
That's
Um,
lovely.
and in the spirit of that, actually, before we start talking, I want to play a very short clip of you performing, if that's okay, just so people
Sure.
vibe of what you do. Yes, you play things that some people only can dream of. So
Oh, bless you. And I'm typical. I'm like everybody. I actually cringe when I watch myself. I'm like, oh, make it stop.
I was going to say that's what often happens, right? It's in the
Yeah.
moment it's great, and then you listen back, you're like, oh, oh.
Yeah.
Before we get into like your playing and piano and jazz and all of that, just a few questions just to for you to get a vibe of who you are outside of music, right? So if you could have a superpower, what would it be?
Yeah, you know what? That's a really great question. I think it would be the power of healing because
Ooh,
I think if everybody was healed, the world would be a better place. There'd be less fighting, less arguing, less wars, more love, less struggle. And I think music, to some degree, as a musician, you have the power, the superpower to heal. It's not a done deal. It's not 100% that it's going to work every time because the recipient has to be open to that. But yeah, sometimes I've played gigs and people have come out crying. And I've seen other friends of mine, like Eska Umtumwazi. I saw her, we did a gig together in Wales last year, and she sang this Joni Mitchell tune. And literally, I saw grown men coming out of the auditorium crying. So the music, if you're a vessel and you're humble to the spirit of creator, God, whatever you want to call it, then that can pass through you and that can be a healing power. But you know, that's it's not a done deal all the time. But yeah, a bit more of that, please, would be good.
I love that answer because it's most of the time, people say, "Oh yeah, I want to fly, I want to like shoot lasers out my eyes," but it's a very
All of that will be good too. Don't get me wrong. I'll bring it on. I'll take them all.
like, what's your favorite fruit?
You know what? I love mangoes. I think most of the people in the world love mangoes. But I have to say, on top of like above and beyond mango, I think it's probably passion fruit.
Oh,
And that's because whatever you put passion fruit on, it tastes tropical. So you could have a it's like passion fruit's got a superpower itself to make everything tropical.
yeah,
Like
like you can't have something passion fruit and it doesn't taste like passion fruit.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just like one little guy. It's like I'm gonna make the world taste of passion fruit, and I love that. He's independent. He's got his own thing going on. He's individual, but very distinctive.
Yeah, yeah.
He's the Herbie Hancock of fruit.
Oh, we should do a whole thing if jazz musicians were fruits. Like,
Oh man. Yeah. I'm up for that. Let me know.
yeah, sounds like this is not bad actually. Last question: if your life was being made into a movie, would it be a thriller, a drama, a horror, or a comedy?
I'm not a drama queen. Drama happens in life. I think probably a comedy. I love laughter, and I'd love to make people laugh. And in in an alternate universe, I'd love to be a stand-up comedian. I might give that a go at some point. I think comedy is a great healer, and it's if you make people laugh and you like to laugh, that's good. So it should be a comedy based on I try to find humor in everything, not laughing at people, but just if there's a bad situation, I try to find the humor in it.
Yeah, that reminds me of a comedian who once said something like, "All comedians think they're musicians, and all musicians think they're funny."
It's true. It's true. I think Harry Hill's a prime example of that. Like I've always thought he was really hilarious when he did his stand-up, and then he brings in a little bit of music, and I'm like, wow, like he's not a great musician, but it just brings something to the comedy.
Yeah, and someone like Tim Minchin, who's like,
yeah,
really
he's wicked.
involved. It's just like, it's like, well, if you didn't touch the piano, you'd be great, and if you didn't,
yeah,
good. So yeah,
and he's selling out big like arena tours and stuff. I'm like, mate, actually, maybe that's the way forward. Jazz and comedy.
Yeah, exactly. So could you tell us about like maybe one of your most special, fulfilling musical experiences?
There's been many. I don't think there's necessarily one in particular, but I mean, anytime I play with my band, we reach a certain, zone. I guess we're zoning, and that to me is like that's the most special thing. I mean, being on stage with people, like when I got to play in Billy Cobham's band for the first time, even like recent times, but playing with Billy every single time we get on stage is a lesson. Playing with Eddie Harris, all of these legends that have played with the legends. I mean, they're Billy played with Horace Silver, played with Miles. I mean, it's like coming from that legacy of who started jazz and passing the baton down. And same with Eddie Harris, when you're playing with the originators of the art form, that to me is like the pinnacle of expression, and when the stars align to make that happen, you grow as a musician and you feel part of the lineage, part of the deep history that jazz is, and that's an honor.
Absolutely. Like what? So you're a pianist, right? So like what? Going all the way back, what really attracted you to the piano as opposed to the trumpet or double bass or xylophone? What was the piano that got you?
I think my grandmother, my nan, I say nan, but then sometimes people think you've had a nanny, and I didn't. I grew up in a council flat in Islington. We didn't have no nannies in Islington back in the day. Now they do. Everyone's got a nanny in Islington. My nan bought me a toy piano from a little sort of junk shop in Exmouth Market, which is it's really hipster now and really cool, but it used to be like proper working class market back in the day. And I was just pointing at this thing from my pram, and she said, yeah, we'll get you that. So she got me this little toy piano, which was blue, little Victorian thing, but I think it had strings on it, which was nuts because it was really small. And I was playing, like listening to kids programs and just picking out melodies from the TV that I could hear, Happy Birthday and things like that. And, my family were like, oh, she's got a bit of a musical ear. And so then they saved up. My mum got me a keyboard, and then my granddad, who used to drive a black cab in London, he took a loan out for £300, which was massive in the 70s. Still a lot of money now, but that was a lot of money back then. And he worked extra hours driving around London to pay off this loan so he could buy me a piano. And so he bought me an upright piano, bless him, put it in the hallway in the council flat, and I just didn't stop playing it. And it's almost like it was meant to be. And in fact, my first instrument was xylophone. It was a little toy xylophone. So any toy, musical toy I had, I was literally like, that's my thing, And luckily, my family, my nana, my granddad, and my mum, who I grew up with, were very open-minded and wanted to push me in that direction. Not push, but like allow me to follow that path. I did try the saxophone. I studied saxophone with Don Rendell at school, who was like a British jazz legend. He had the Rendell Carr Quintet, who I also studied with Ian Cast in my sort of late teens, who's been a massive influence on the way that I teach and on the way that I play. But saxophone, I loved it, and I was apparently, according to Don, quite good at it, but I just felt like I didn't have time to do both, you know. And when you're a kid, you've got all the time, but you don't realize.
So if you're listening, remember that you've got more time now than you realize. When you get older, you'll realize.
Yeah.
And let's get into jazz from that point, because it's one thing, you know, having a piano and, you know, maybe playing along to stuff you hear, but it's another thing getting into jazz, which I think for many people growing up, for me anyway, you know, jazz was very much that style of music that, yeah, it's cool, but I won't listen to it at home. But it's cool, but you know what I mean? I won't go somewhere and listen. So it's like, yeah, it's acceptable, right? But it's not something that I'm going to do on a Sunday afternoon, or I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. So like, how did you get into jazz?
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, for me, I kept hearing this word jazz. It was like a calling, you know, like a spiritual calling. I kept hearing this word jazz, even though nobody around me really knew what it was. And my nan has a friend who she used to go and my nan used to do her shopping for her because she was disabled. She couldn't move around too much, but she could play the piano, and she used to earn a lot of her money from playing the piano at like charity gigs and stuff. So she was like my access to somebody in the world of music. And I said, did you know any jazz? And she was like, no. She gave me a book of like the bare necessities, like Walt Disney Jungle Book. And then I saw these things like chords that were and tab that was above the line, and I thought, that's interesting. And something told me that I need to learn how to decipher that. Anyway, it wasn't until I got to secondary school and had saxophone lessons with Don that I say, look, you know, what's this jazz stuff going on? What is, you know, I've heard Courtney Pine, Children of the Ghetto. I'd heard that his first EP release, which blew my mind, because on the B side of that, there was this stuff with Julian Joseph and Mark Daisy playing. It was absolutely killing. And I said to Don, I was like, what is this thing called jazz? And he said, you need to check out Coltrane, you need to check out Miles, you need to check out Sonny Rollins. So I'd go to the record library after school, the library that had records in it, and I'd get my records out, which I think was 10 pence per record. And like everybody, I'd go home and take them illegally. And I'd always have, like, one time I had like Coltrane, Africa Brass on one side of the cassette and Phil Collins on the opposite side. And on my way to school, I used to listen to Phil Collins and love Phil Collins because it was the 80s. And then I'd have to kind of endure the Coltrane more avant-garde stuff, because it was cheaper to listen to the whole side of the tape than it was to rewind it back, because batteries were really expensive. And you know, for young people that are listening to this, you couldn't charge your Walkman, you had to put batteries in it. And batteries were expensive. You couldn't, there's no pound shop, it was proper, it was money. So you'd have to listen to the whole thing. And at one point on my journey to school, like one day listening to Phil Collins, next day listening to Coltrane, at one point I got really bored with listening to Phil Collins and couldn't wait to hear Coltrane. And it showed me that really what a taste for eclectic music and slightly strange sounds, the more you listen to it and the more there is familiarity, the more comfortable you are with it. And then when you're immersed in an idiom also being symbiotic, the word for language, once you're immersed in that language, you're more comfortable with the sounds of that language, and you crave and desire to hear them more, and they can be a comforter and a soother, and they can also be intriguing. So that was my journey into finding jazz. And then I got more and more into that avant-garde. I just went down that path and was really into like Evan Parker, Cecil Taylor, Thelonious Monk.
Okay, got you. So like one of the things that I think trips up a lot of people is the idea of, because listening to jazz is one thing, right? But playing and improvising is a whole different thing. And one of the things that really trip people up is just improvising. Where do you start? You know, how did you sound like yourself? How do you go from learning scales and chords to being free? Like that process. So like, could you maybe, we don't have we don't have time to go into like all the details, right? But how do you see improvising in your work, in your life?
It's just such a good question, and I was actually talking about this with my colleague at Music Education Islington the other day, of which I'm lead for jazz and pop and improvised music, part of under the banner of Guildhall, but we're a music hub in Islington. And we set up a centre a couple of years ago just for jazz, mostly for jazz. And my course there is called Jazz, Funk Fusion, Afrobeat, Experimental and Beyond Band Practice. And that is inspired by my old teacher, Ian Carr, who used to call his class reggae, funk, fusion and jazz, something like that. Because I think firstly, we need to take away the label of jazz because it can feel very highbrow. And don't get me wrong, jazz is a very intellectual subject, but first and foremost, the love of music is what should attract you to learning about improvisation. And you can improvise over anything. So like with my kids on in our class on a Monday night, I literally get them to, we might play something like Uptown Funk, which they all love and they all know, or Valerie, and then choose 3 notes that are part of the melody, say, and just get them to improvise in very, very small sections. To me, it's like with jazz, it's like playing a whole chorus of like 32 bars when you're just starting out can feel terrifying, because mostly kids and adults too, actually, they just want the ground to swallow them up. They don't want that much spotlight on them. Like me, when I'm watching myself playing at the beginning, I'm like, I don't want that attention, even though I'm a performer and I actively seek that attention. It's a real kind of oxymoron in a way, but or contradiction, I should say. But you know, giving a student a couple of notes, 1 note even, and saying mess around with the rhythm and then maybe 2 notes, rather than a whole load of scales, or thinking you have to break down everything into analyzing like a Schenkerian Bach analysis. You know, when you're just starting out, it's mostly about confidence. Also engaging with your learners to say, actually, the ones that have been doing it a bit longer, I'll go around and say, if someone's really nervous, I'll say, what was your experience like? And everybody's going to say, I felt really nervous. And then that really, it normalizes the experience of it being nerve-wracking, because it is, right? You know, yeah. If you asked me to ice skate in front of a bunch of people, I can't ice skate. I'd be terrified. But if I know everyone else was, then maybe it makes it a bit more easy for me to jump on the ice, you know? Of
course. And maybe the analogy there is like, instead of looking at it, well, yes, you have to ice skate, so now go around the rink 10 times.
Exactly.
Like, no, just
a twirl.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, no, it's all right. Just hold on. Let's do a couple of steps. And then come off, and then let's do a couple more and let's come off, and just build slowly until you get to a point, you know, you can do 1 little round, and that's okay.
Exactly. In fact, there's a Fred Wesley. I played with Fred Wesley, who's part of the JBs. You know, played with Fred, and we played that tune, "Pass the Peas." You know, pass the peas, pass the peas, pass the peas, like they used to say, that tune, right? And so I kind of arranged that so. First of all, it's in a nice key for all instruments, and then there's a little bit. So he normally does this thing, goes, but I just stop after the first 2, 3, 4. I just have a bar there, and within that bar, first it's your turn, then it's your turn, then it's your turn. And if you make just a squeak on your instrument, that's okay. And that actually gets people over from feeling, oh my gosh, I've got to fill up 16 bars of solo with loads of ideas just to actually just making a sound. So first of all, yeah, I think that's important. The confidence, and then the relationship with the instrument, where you're producing the music, not that you're reproducing something that somebody else has written. That needs to be addressed first of all. And from there, once people have confidence, as we know with anything in life, then they can tackle the world, you know?
Ooh. So like, as a performer, could you maybe share like a moment of kind of pure, like just happiness and joy? And could you also share a moment of like horror and I can't believe I just did that?
I think the happiness and joy has come several times from biting the bullet and just jumping on stage. So like the first time that I was at a jazz cafe jam session when I was like 17, 18, and they wanted somebody to sit in on piano, and the piano player that was going to do it had a fit of nerves and left, and all of my friends were saying, go on, join in, jump up on stage. And there was like a load of heavyweights on stage of Steve Williamson, Cameron Pierre, who used to play in Courtney Pine's band, Courtney Pine himself, Lonnie Plaxico from the M-Bass Collective from America. Can't remember who was on drums, but it was a killer lineup. I think it was Winston Clifford on drums. Can't remember, but like killer lineup. And so I was terrified, but then decided right at the last minute to jump up on stage. So I did. And having not done anything like that before, like I jumped up on jam sessions, but not with that kind of stellar lineup. And then Courtney was playing, and he was like looking at me over his saxophone and over these little kind of round 80s or 90s glasses he had, staring at me. And I thought, oh man, he's going to tell me to give up. He thinks I'm rubbish. Right? And then I played a solo and the audience loved it. I was like, yeah, okay, but they don't really know what they're talking about. You know, they're just here on a Saturday afternoon, you know, loads of self-doubt. And at the end, I was about to leave, and Gary Crosby tapped me on the shoulder and he said, Courtney wants to have a word with you upstairs. And I thought to myself, he's going to definitely tell me to give up, you know. And so I went upstairs, and Courtney basically asked my number. 2 months later, I was in his band. Yeah, I started depping for Becky Mseleku, fantastic South African piano player who's no longer with us, but he was in Courtney's band, but also he was like recording with Blue Note and stuff, so he was super busy. So from then it just kicked my musical career off. And then I was playing with simultaneously with Pine's band. I was in Naina Cherry's band, which started off my band. So then I had my debut at the Jazz Cafe was with my own band, 24th of January 1993 or 93. That was a big high point. So it's like that kind of journey, just by embracing the fear, feeling the fear, but thinking, if I don't do this, then why are you practicing? Why do you want to seek this word jazz that you've been hearing in your mind as a child all this time, if you don't throw yourself into it? And then everything just spiraled. Then I started playing with the Roots, and when we did a recording with Roy Ayers, and like just from then everything just like opened up. And similarly, then when I had my son, the phone stopped ringing, because people somehow think as a woman that if you if you have a child that you don't need to play gigs and earn money. I don't know why. You know, the phone stopped ringing. And then when he was a little bit older, fast forwarding because I know we're running out of time, I was at a Chick career gig, and the same thing happens. Chick was like, who wants to come and join me on stage? And so somebody else actually got there before me, and they played something. I thought, they're not going to ask anybody again, because why would they ask two members of the audience? But he did, and I had a feeling that I would go up. It's just a gut feeling. So I went up there and played in front of a packed house at the Barbican, which I think is just seats just under 3,000, maybe it's 2,700. And that was a fantastic moment, because that also kind of in a way relaunched my career, because you know, people were like, oh yeah, I forgot Nikki was on the scene. And then all of a sudden, I mean, we got a review in The Guardian. I was on Chick's review. I totally gave Kirsty's gig. So I mean, I guess they've been pivotal. There's been other musical related moments like that happen pretty much every time you play, because I've always come from the standpoint that you should play every gig as if it's your last gig. And that's what John McLaughlin said. Like every time he goes on stage, he's like, I could die tomorrow. This is going to be my last gig. So, and it's the same when I travel around the world to play, or traveling around the UK to play. I'm like, wow, I've never been to I don't know, Market Harbour, or in wherever it is, little town. So most people will be like, oh, I'm playing this little town. I'll be like, man, I'm so excited. I try and embrace every musical opportunity. Also being in the place wherever you go to play a gig, like embrace that little bit of cultural experience you've got, whether it's Margate or whether it's Mauritius. You know, you're bound to, you know, you're going to meet nice people, you're going to touch that community with your music. hopefully in a healing way, in a loving way, and that's why you're there. So there's always moments, but those two, I guess they're pivotal, tangible moments that have actually changed the shape of my career, you know.
Amazing. I wonder if you could briefly just talk to us about about skills. One of the things that I've said to many people today is just like, it's great hearing your stories, but it's always really important, I think, to understand some of the skills that you've learned about on your journey as well. Because people we've spoken to today, it's like you get into something and you don't have all the skills. You're not, you're not really, you don't feel like you're ready to do the job. And then as you're doing it, you're learning, oh, actually, I need to do this, and I've acquired this skill now, and this is something that I never thought I'd be doing, but I'm doing it and I'm doing it well. So like, could you give maybe one or two examples of, a skill that you've learned over the years that has really helped you in your career?
Yeah, I think the most important thing that I've learned is that it's not a competition. And that when we play music, we play together. And I instill this in my students as well, that because music can be very competitive. I mean, I'm saying this, but I've been MD for BBC Young Jazz Musician for the last couple of rounds. And so, but I'm not really into competitions at the same time, and I'm not into people competing, because if you listen to, say, I don't know, if you listen to Oscar Peterson, obviously his technique is just incredible. I mean, he's an incredible classical musician as well, he was. But if you listen to somebody like Horace Silver, they probably, Horace has got good technique, but it's a very much more understated thing. But doesn't mean that Oscar is better than Horace. They've both got their own voice. And so I think it's like, when you jump on the bandstand as well, always playing a supportive role. And even when you're playing a solo, you're still playing with the group. So it's a joint effort. It's a team thing. It's same way that a footballer, the striker can't strike that goal if the midfielder's not set it up. It's got to be a team effort.
Yeah, I think that's so important, because I think, and I've recognized that in myself, if I'm being very honest, sometimes the reflex can be seeing someone play or hearing someone play and be like, oh yeah, either I can do better, or it's not very good, right? Instead of realizing, like, and something that Cassie touched on earlier and a few others touched on, is your own personal expression is unique to you, right? And so what they do is unique to them, and it's that thing of putting yourself out there for people to see and to connect with that unique thing inside of you. That's what people are connecting to. It's not necessarily how fast you're playing, or how how many licks you can do, or this or this or this. It's that unique way that you express yourself that is connected.
Definitely.
If you sit there and say, well, I could do better, but you never put anything out there, you don't know what the reception is going to be like if you don't put yourself out there, right?
It's true. I mean, on the other hand, it's important to push yourself, it's like, but then it's like you say, if it can be, if it can stop you from pushing yourself, then it becomes more of a hindrance. So it's listening and being part of a team with within a band. I think that's, it's a mature skill, because most younger players they play from ego rather than playing from a centered place. It's very rare that you find people that just want to play from a grounded place when they're super young. But if they can harness that, then the music's always going to sound better. Yeah,
and it's just understanding especially playing with others, you're a part of something. You're a part of a sound.
Yeah.
Bring what you can to that sound, to make it resonate with people in the best way possible, rather than trying to outshine or trying to take for yourself. It's not about,
I mean, have your moment and shine and stuff, but it's got shine and then bring people along with you. So it's I mean, there were some kids on our Monday night that are just like, one boy, he's grade 8. He was grade 8 on 2 different instruments when he was in year 8. It's just insane. But he's got such humility because he comes from a family of folk musicians. So he's got this really mature disposition instilled in him, and that's really rare. I'm can't wait to see where his journey goes, because he's already got all the humility as well as the skills going on. So it means that he's going to be you know, it's like the ego can sometimes block us to receiving the message. And so I think once you remove that sort of the ego, then you can receive, you know, the message as an artist. And so for me, watching that young person, I'm thinking, I'm so interested to see where they're going to go in their career, because they're open and they're also very, very highly skilled.
Absolutely. Before we go, and I feel like our time's been really, really short.
It's too short, isn't it? I want another couple of hours, Nate. What's going on?
Well, we have to do this again for sure.
Yeah.
Before we go, just if there are any like little bits of advice you could share with anyone who's thinking about getting into jazz, or someone who's in it and maybe struggling with improvisation or anything like that, anything you could share to maybe help someone just get over a little bit of a hump.
Sure, a couple of things. I think there's firstly, always listen to the original track. So, you know, there's real books out there and fake books, whatever they're called, that, you know, with the lead sheet, and they're really useful. And sometimes they're the really great way of making sure that you've learnt the melody in this, you know, can double check a couple of notes and stuff, but always listen to the original track and transcribe as much as you can, you know, and by that I mean, you know, sing it first. If you can sing it, you can play it. So, and then don't be scared to practice things super slowly. In fact, that is really the best way. Practice everything slowly, first of all. You're going to really nail the phrasing, and we're going to really understand the articulation. And as a language, you know, that's really important, even more than the notes. And then I'd also say within that as well, when you do read a lead sheet, just know that everything on the page is not actually how you need to play it all the time. It's just a suggestion. So, you know, the melody, you can articulate it at a different way, and you can even change the chords and all of that. But you have to know how to play it first before you can do that. But yeah, it's just a different approach. If you're coming from a classical mindset, quite often I see with students that are very, very good at reading, they'll see a jazz lead sheet and it looks easy because like it's a melody and some chords, and then they'll play the chord on the one in root position all the time if they're piano players. And I'm like, it takes ages to get them to think, actually, you can change the rhythm, you can change the chord, but you can also change the voicing. So always be questioning what you're playing as well, whether or not you can change it up and add a little different flavor to it. And you know, get some good lessons if you can. You know, there are good teachers out there. If you're in Islington, come to our class on a Monday night if you're under 18. That's a really good place to start. We have brilliant teachers. We've got Sultan Stevenson teachers with us. You know, he's like the new light on the British jazz scene. We have Jesse Donyap Hughes, who's also another young piano player who's wicked. We've got Ruben Paolo on trumpet and Binka Goldin, Bell Haswell. We've got like a wicked team of fantastic jazz practitioners and educators. So something like that. If you're not based in London, clearly there's other stuff in your area.
Well, thank you so much for that. And yeah, hopefully we can do something a bit longer next time. But,
absolute pleasure, Nate. I'm a massive fan. You know, your books are fantastic. Absolutely, every school should have your books. I hope everybody on here has read your books, because superb.
Thank you. Let's make. I don't know how we do that. Get all these books into all these schools.
It needs to happen.
Yeah,
representation is key. It's very, very good. Very, very good that you've written all this stuff. Love it.
Thank you. All right. So you take care. Enjoy the rest of your day. And yeah, everyone who's here to listen, and you know, check out Nikki's music. I was playing some earlier. I'll put some on again, you know, if you're joining us on Thursday as well. So yeah, thank you once again for your time.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. Hope to catch you at a gig soon.
Sure. All right.
See you later, mate.
Bye.
Bye.